She ridiculed the trainee human until the apex predators retreated. The Galactic Defense Academy floated in orbit above the neutral planet of Arcanis, a massive research station converted into a training ground for elite warriors from dozens of species. Each species was selected for traits the galaxy had long respected: strength, cunning, psychic power, or speed. Humans, however, were a new addition. Small, fragile, and slow compared to other species, humans were considered the weakest trainees ever admitted. Most of the older students whispered about them behind their hands, using words that humans were too soft, too fragile, and too insignificant to ever make a mark in real combat. The human trainee, named Caleb, stood silently among them. He was small, barely reaching the waist height of the shortest predator in the academy. His body was lean, unarmored, and clearly unmodified. No special implants, no natural weapons, no intimidating presence. On paper, he was the least threatening individual in the entire academy. Yet, he had survived, been selected, and placed in training because of one trait the others failed to notice. Humans could endure far more than they appeared capable of. During the first briefing, the instructors gathered the cadets in the central simulation hall. Caleb's instructor, Commander Ithara, a towering reptilian predator with serrated teeth and glowing amber eyes, did not hide her disdain. She moved across the room, tail swishing, scanning the room of trainees like a predator evaluating prey. When her gaze landed on Caleb, a low, amused hiss escaped her throat. "Observe this human," she said, her voice cutting like a knife through the chatter. "The Academy has granted him entry despite his lack of natural abilities. Note the irony. In a room full of apex hunters, the weakest species will attempt to keep pace with creatures far beyond his capabilities. Watch closely. This will be entertaining." The other trainees snickered quietly. Predators who had already been part of combat units shared knowing glances. They all believed the same thing. Humans could survive in controlled simulations, perhaps, but on the battlefield, a human would last minutes at best. Caleb, however, said nothing. He lowered his eyes slightly, not out of fear, but in silent acknowledgement of the mockery. He had learned early in life that showing anger or fear only gave opponents power over you. After the briefing, the cadets were assigned to their first survival exercise, a live drop onto Varkin 9, a planet notorious for its wild predators. Caleb's drop team consisted of 2 other humans and 3 members of the Drellin species, a wolf-like predator with fur in varying shades of gray and powerful legs built for hunting. The humans were given only basic survival gear and a personal energy emitter for emergencies. The Drellins were equipped with full combat packs, including blade implants and gravity-modified rifles. As the drop pods hurtled through Varkin 9's dense atmosphere, Caleb studied the landscape below. The planet was covered in thick forests with twisted trees and jagged rocks. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the foliage, betraying the presence of creatures far larger than any land animal Caleb had seen on Earth. The cadets could feel the tension in the pods, a silent nervousness that no amount of training could erase. The pods landed with a jarring crash, shaking the trainees and kicking up dust and leaves. The human team scrambled out first, while Ithara's drone surveillance immediately began streaming predator movement. Caleb observed the terrain and noticed something others overlooked. The predators were not moving randomly. They stalked in patterns, circling the human landing zones as if analyzing the weaknesses of the new arrivals. It did not take long before chaos erupted. A pack of shadow-scaled predators, each easily twice the size of a Drellin, launched from the undergrowth. Their claws cut into the soft soil, and their glowing eyes locked onto the nearest targets. The Drellins reacted instinctively, roaring and firing their weapons while attempting to flank the creatures. The humans followed orders, but panic was spreading. For every predator shot, another appeared. Their movements were coordinated in a way that no simulation had prepared the cadets for. Caleb did not run. He crouched behind a fallen log, observing the predator's behavior. He noticed that each predator preferred to strike isolated targets, reacting violently to sudden movements. More importantly, they avoided certain areas of the forest, patches where the terrain was denser, where fallen trees and thick undergrowth forced them to navigate carefully. Humans were small and agile. Caleb realized he could use this to his advantage. While the Drellins tried to force a path through, Caleb silently guided the human cadets into a narrow corridor created by dense trees and jagged rocks. He tapped on a communicator to signal his two human teammates, directing them with quiet gestures. As they moved, the predators followed at a distance, unwilling to enter the narrow spaces where their size was a disadvantage. Caleb had created a safe zone without firing a single shot. Commander Ithara watched through her tactical console, eyes narrowing. "Interesting," she muttered. "The human is calculating." Her amusement had faded into something closer to curiosity. She had never encountered a species that could navigate danger without attempting brute force or psychic dominance. Caleb's approach was methodical. He was learning, observing, and manipulating the environment, turning weakness into strength. By the time night fell on Varkan 9, the trainees had moved deeper into the forest, guided by Caleb. The predators were still hunting, still circling, but they began avoiding areas where the humans had established temporary shelters. Caleb had arranged branches and rocks to create barriers that subtly influenced the predators' path, forcing them to retreat in frustration when they could not strike effectively. Other cadets began to notice. The Drellans, initially dismissive, started to follow Caleb's lead instead of charging blindly. Even some of the older predator trainees hesitated, realizing that brute force would not overcome the human strategy. One of them, a four-armed insectoid named Thrak, muttered under his breath, "I do not understand. How can a human know a trainee control the behavior of apex predators?" Caleb did not answer. He never did. He focused on observing, on calculating, on surviving. That night, as the group rested in a natural clearing, the predators lurked at the edges. Their eyes glinted in the dim light, and their growls echoed through the forest. Most cadets shivered, imagining the sharp teeth and claws closing in. Caleb, however, sat quietly, picking up on their rhythms. He realized that the predators were intelligent hunters. They tested, probed, and adapted. By maintaining calm and using subtle cues, he could guide them without direct confrontation. The next morning, the chaos escalated. The apex predators grew bolder, attacking larger groups and pushing the cadets toward cliffs and ravines. Caleb moved calmly, directing individuals to climb, crouch, or circle, always keeping the predators on paths that led away from danger. At one point, a young Drellan trainee panicked and ran straight into a predator's path. Caleb reacted instinctively, grabbing the trainee and pulling him behind a boulder just in time. The predator skidded to a halt, assessing the situation, and then retreated slightly, confused by the human's unexpected action. By midday, Ithara's eyes were glued to the displays. Caleb's methods were unprecedented. Every predator movement could be traced back to subtle human interference. Environmental manipulation, psychological understanding. He was surviving not by matching strength, but by anticipating behavior. And every time he acted, the predators adjusted, retreating from zones he had influenced. The other trainees started to whisper, first with disbelief, then with respect. The same cadets who laughed at him in the briefing hall now followed his lead, mimicking his patience and observation. Caleb never demanded authority, he simply demonstrated effectiveness. When a particularly massive predator appeared, one that could crush a Drellan in a single swipe, the group froze. The creature snarled, its eyes locking onto Caleb. For a moment, no one moved. Then Caleb stepped forward. He raised his hands, not in surrender, but in controlled, slow movements. He advanced gradually, guiding the predator toward a narrow pass where it could not strike efficiently. The predator hesitated, growled, and then, inexplicably, turned and retreated into the forest. A collective gasp echoed from the trainees and instructors alike. Humans, small and fragile, had forced retreat from creatures considered unstoppable. Caleb lowered his hands, chest heaving slightly, exhausted by the focus required. Yet he did not celebrate. He never did. Survival was the goal, not recognition. Ithara leaned back in her chair, staring at the screens in stunned silence. The amusement she had felt in the briefing hall had vanished. In its place was the undeniable realization she had misjudged humans entirely. Not by strength, speed, or psychic ability, but by endurance, patience, and intelligence. Caleb had done what no other species could. He had controlled the battlefield without controlling anyone directly. As the drop exercise continued, other cadets began to adopt his strategies. Even veteran species, previously dismissive, took notes. The human trainee, once ridiculed as weak and insignificant, had shifted the balance of the exercise. The apex predators still roamed, still dangerous, but now they were cautious, hesitant. The weak species had found a way to survive where all others would have failed. Caleb looked at the horizon, eyes steady, body tense from constant awareness. He knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would continue to underestimate humans. And that underestimation was exactly what made survival possible. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of Varkin 9, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Caleb's group moved quietly, each step deliberate, every sound measured. The predators from the previous day were still in the area, lurking beyond sight but always aware, always testing. The other trainees, once dismissive, now followed Caleb's lead closely. Even the Drellans, who had initially laughed at him, deferred to his judgment, watching how he moved, how he observed, how he calculated every risk before taking action. Caleb's attention never wavered. He had learned that panic was the greatest threat, not from predators, but from his own teammates. One misstep, one sudden movement, could draw a predator into the wrong path. He gestured quietly to his two human companions, indicating the safest route around a cluster of jagged rocks where he had noticed large claw marks. The sounds of the forest shifted subtly as the predators prowled, searching for patterns, testing boundaries. Caleb noticed every rustle, every shadow, and every shift in their behavior. The first major encounter of the day came swiftly. A massive predator, easily the size of a small transport vehicle, emerged from the undergrowth. Its black scales shimmered under the sunlight, and its eyes, glowing with a pale yellow intensity, scanned the group. Its teeth were long and serrated, and it exhaled with a hiss that sent a shiver through even the most seasoned cadets. The Drellans readied their weapons instinctively, growling and flexing their claws. Panic rippled through the human trainees. Caleb stepped forward calmly. He did not draw a weapon, nor did he make a threatening gesture. Instead, he adjusted his pace, moving slowly but deliberately, projecting a sense of confidence that belied his small frame. He had learned early that predators relied on perceived weakness as much as they relied on scent and sight. By showing no fear, by moving with purpose, he could alter their perception. The massive predator paused, assessing this tiny creature that refused to run or attack. Caleb raised his hand slightly and moved toward a narrow gorge carved into the landscape. The predator followed, reluctant at first, but drawn by curiosity. Caleb's plan was simple: guide the predator into a confined area where its size became a disadvantage. Every step was calculated, every motion precise. The other trainees followed cautiously, trusting his judgment. When the predator entered the gorge, its bulk made movement awkward. Its claws scraped against the rocky walls as it tried to maneuver, and its growls turned to frustrated hisses. Caleb's strategy worked perfectly. The predator could observe the group but could not strike effectively. Ithara, monitoring the exercise from orbit, leaned closer to her console. She could not hide her surprise. "How?" she muttered, barely audible. Every known species had failed in similar scenarios, relying on strength or overwhelming firepower to force apex predators back. But here, a human, a single trainee, was controlling the battlefield through observation and calculated movement. The rest of the day tested the cadets' endurance. More predators emerged from the shadows. Packs of mid-sized hunters, stealthy skimmers that moved through the treetops, and venomous stalkers that slithered across the forest floor. The other species, instincts screamed at them to attack or flee, but Caleb's calm guidance allowed the team to navigate each encounter with minimal risk. He observed patterns, directed movement, and manipulated the environment, using natural obstacles to block paths or funnel predators away from the group. A critical moment came when a skimmer swooped down from above, aiming for one of the human trainees. Caleb reacted instantly, pushing the trainee behind a cluster of dense foliage. The skimmer's claws caught on the branches and it screeched in frustration before retreating. The other cadets stared, incredulous. Caleb had not struck the predator, had not fired a weapon, yet the skimmer had been forced to retreat purely through his timing and positioning. The Drellans began to whisper among themselves. "He is controlling them," one muttered. Another shook his head. "Not through strength. Not through weaponry, somehow through presence, through understanding." Even the older predators, usually stoic and unmoved, watched Caleb with a mix of awe and wariness. The humans' actions were unpredictable yet effective. Caleb knew that the predators were learning. Each step he took, each adjustment he made was teaching the creature's boundaries. Unlike other species, humans did not rely solely on brute force. They adapted, they learned, they survived. And the predators were slowly realizing that this human, small and seemingly weak, was not to be underestimated. As the sun reached its peak, the group stumbled upon a clearing. The ground was scarred with claw marks and remnants of past confrontations. Here, the predators seemed most aggressive. Caleb paused, scanning the area. He noticed subtle signs that indicated predator paths and ambush points. Rocks displaced in a certain pattern, broken branches, even the scent carried on the wind, everything provided information. He used these details to plot a safe path through the clearing, marking directions with quiet hand signals and soft verbal cues to his teammates. Suddenly, a pack of mid-sized predators emerged from the tree line, their movements coordinated, their eyes fixed on the group. Panic threatened to spread, but Caleb's calm presence anchored the cadets. He moved forward deliberately, guiding the humans into narrow passages formed by fallen trees and large boulders. The predators followed, frustrated by the humans' unexpected tactics. Some growled, others hesitated, and a few retreated entirely. One of the Drellans, impressed and uneasy, whispered, "This human, he thinks like a predator, but not like any predator I have known." Caleb did not respond. He never did. Words were unnecessary. Actions mattered. Survival mattered. As night fell, the predators' activity intensified. Their glowing eyes could be seen stalking through the forest, and their low growls echoed in the clearing. The cadets, exhausted but alert, followed Caleb's lead as he directed them to a sheltered area beneath a cliff overhang. Using branches, rocks, and natural formations, he created subtle barriers that provided concealment and forced predators into indirect paths. Once again, his methods succeeded without a single direct attack. Around the campfire, the cadets ate their rations in silence. Caleb's two human companions looked at him with quiet admiration. They had never imagined a human could survive, let alone control the behavior of creatures designed to dominate every species they encountered. The Drellans, still wary, nodded respectfully. Even Thrak, the insectoid cadet, was unusually quiet, his multiple eyes fixed on Caleb in thoughtful observation. Commander Ithara's voice came through the communicator, tense but intrigued. "Report." "How is the team holding?" Caleb responded calmly, describing predator movement, terrain obstacles, and safe zones. He outlined how each encounter had been navigated, emphasizing observation and adaptability rather than confrontation. Ithara listened, her disbelief growing. This was not merely survival, it was mastery. A human had survived against apex predators not by matching their strength, but by understanding them, predicting them, and using the environment as a tool. The night passed with intermittent disturbances. Predators prowled the edges of the camp, testing boundaries, but Caleb's guidance kept the group safe. When one predator approached too closely, he used subtle movements and careful positioning to redirect it. Other trainees began to imitate his techniques, noticing that even a small adjustment in posture or movement could influence predator behavior. By dawn, it was clear that the human had fundamentally changed the dynamics of the survival exercise. Morning brought new challenges. A massive predator, previously unseen, emerged from the shadows. Its body was sleek, muscular, and covered in dark scales that shimmered in the rising sun. Its eyes, pale and intelligent, scanned the human group, calculating threats. The cadets froze. The Drellans readied their weapons, but Caleb stepped forward. He moved slowly, deliberately, showing no fear. He guided the group into a narrow gorge just as he had done before. The predator followed, frustrated by the lack of an easy target. Its growls became softer, more uncertain. Finally, it turned and retreated, unwilling to navigate the confined space where it could not strike effectively. The cadets exhaled collectively. Caleb, exhausted but composed, lowered his hands. Once again, he had survived by understanding, adapting, and using strategy rather than strength. The apex predator had retreated, not defeated, but unwilling to engage. Ithara, monitoring from orbit, could barely contain her astonishment. A human trainee had altered the behavior of a species considered unstoppable. By midday, Caleb's leadership had become apparent. The other cadets followed his movements without hesitation, adopting his strategies and observing his decision-making. Even veteran species began to question their assumptions about humans. This small, seemingly weak species had survived where others would have fallen. They had demonstrated that intelligence, observation, and adaptability could overcome even the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. As the group moved toward the edge of the forest, Caleb felt a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. He knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy underestimated humans at its peril, and each time a predator retreated, each time a trainee survived because of his guidance, the perception of humanity shifted slightly. No one in the galaxy had expected this. No one had anticipated that a human could change the rules of survival without weapons, without strength, and without intimidation. But Caleb had done it, quietly, methodically, and effectively. The forest of Varkin 9 was quieter than usual that morning. The mist hung low among twisted trees, and the dense undergrowth glistened with dew. For the first time, the predators seemed hesitant, moving cautiously as if aware that the humans were no longer prey to be tested, but opponents to be studied. Caleb's team had learned to move silently, communicate with subtle gestures, and read the signs of danger before it appeared. Yet this day promised new challenges, larger predators, more cunning tactics, and a forest that seemed alive with threats waiting just beyond sight. Caleb led his group along a narrow ridge, every footfall deliberate. The other trainees followed closely, matching his pace. The Drellans had stopped questioning him, instead watching how he navigated terrain, timed his steps, and reacted to subtle shifts in the environment. Caleb did not speak often. When he did, his voice was calm and precise, directing movement or signaling danger. The apex predators had been testing them for hours now, and Caleb had begun to understand their patterns. They were not mindless killers. They adapted, they learned, and they respected consistency. A sudden rustle in the foliage caught Caleb's attention. His senses, honed by observation and experience, recognized the approach of something massive. The group froze, instinctively looking for the source. From the shadows of a dense grove emerged a creature unlike any they had encountered before. Its body was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Drellin. Its dark scales reflected the dim sunlight in a metallic sheen, and its eyes burned with a pale, cold intelligence. This was a true apex predator, the kind the galaxy whispered about but few had survived encountering. The other cadets panicked. The Drellins hissed, claws flexing instinctively. Some stepped back, unsure whether to fight or flee. Humans and smaller species pressed close to Caleb, looking for guidance. Caleb, however, stepped forward calmly. He had learned that fear was contagious, and that panic would lead to disaster. He took a deep breath, analyzing the predator's movements. Unlike the other predators they had faced, this one was deliberate and patient, circling the team, testing reactions. Its sheer size made it confident, yet it hesitated at certain terrain features, as if recognizing obstacles that could hinder it. Caleb began to move slowly, guiding the team along a ridge that narrowed to a series of natural stone barriers. He gestured for the trainees to spread slightly, but not too much, creating a formation that suggested a larger, coordinated presence. The predator followed, cautious but curious, testing the humans' boundaries. Caleb knew that in a direct confrontation, none of them would survive. They had to manipulate perception, make the predator hesitate, and force it into a position where it could not strike without risk. Minutes passed, each second stretching with tension. Caleb's plan required patience, precise timing, and subtle adjustments. When the predator made a sudden lunge toward one of the human trainees, Caleb reacted instantly, stepping in and positioning himself in the predator's line of sight. His movement was deliberate, slow, and confident. The predator paused, assessing this small creature that refused to flee. Caleb then shifted slightly, using the terrain to his advantage, guiding the predator along a narrow passage between jagged rocks and fallen trees. The predator hesitated again, frustrated that its preferred path to attack was blocked. Ithara, observing from orbit, could barely contain her disbelief. A human, small and unarmed, was manipulating the movements of an apex predator. No species had ever done this. She watched Caleb's every action, realizing that this was more than survival. It was mastery. The predator, despite its size and strength, could not act decisively against a human who understood patterns, perception, and environmental advantage. The predator's patience began to wane. It made small adjustments, testing the humans, sniffing the air, circling once more. Caleb's focus was unwavering. He knew that one wrong move could end everything. He had to make the predator believe it was facing a threat it could not understand. Slowly, he guided the humans through a narrow gorge, a constricted passage formed naturally by cliffs and fallen trees. The predator entered, but its size became a disadvantage. Its claws scraped the rocky walls, its body was too large to maneuver efficiently, and its frustration was evident. For the first time, the predator hesitated completely. It growled softly, not in aggression, but in uncertainty. Caleb seized the moment. He positioned himself deliberately in the predator's line of sight, creating the illusion of a larger, coordinated presence. He clapped his hands once, a subtle noise that echoed through the gorge. The predator froze, assessing the situation. Caleb stepped forward, calm, deliberate, projecting confidence and control. The predator hesitated, then turned and retreated, slinking back into the shadows. The cadets exhaled collectively. They could not believe what they had just witnessed. The largest, most dangerous predator on the planet had been forced to retreat, not by force, but by strategy and perception. Caleb's method was simple, yet it required immense focus, patience, and understanding of predator behavior. He had altered the rules of engagement simply by being human. The group moved cautiously through the forest, aware that the predator could return at any moment. Caleb's calm presence had become a shield, a guiding force that kept the team together and alive. The Drellans whispered among themselves, still in disbelief. "How can a human control such a creature?" one muttered. "It is impossible," said another, yet the evidence was undeniable. Caleb had done what no other species could. As they continued, they encountered smaller predator packs. Each time, Caleb's approach remained the same: observation, understanding, subtle manipulation of the environment, and precise timing. He guided the humans through narrow passages, used natural barriers to redirect predators, and maintained calm in the face of threats that would have shattered the confidence of any other trainee. Slowly, the predators began to avoid areas he had influenced, showing signs of hesitation that had never been recorded before. By mid-afternoon, the team had navigated through multiple encounters without a single injury beyond minor scrapes. Caleb's methods had not only ensured survival, but had taught the cadets a new approach to danger. They began to anticipate predator behavior themselves, following his example and learning to move with awareness rather than panic. Caleb had become a silent leader, not through authority, but through action and understanding. The apex predator from the morning did not return, yet its presence lingered in the minds of the trainees. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves reminded them of its power. Caleb knew they were being tested again, that survival required constant vigilance. He also knew that the predators had learned from him as much as he had learned from them. Every step he took, every adjustment he made, altered the behavior of creatures that had ruled the forest for centuries. As night fell, the cadets set up camp in a sheltered canyon. Caleb directed them to use fallen trees and rocks as barriers, not to attack, but to create zones that predators would avoid. He moved silently through the camp, checking positions, adjusting placements, and ensuring that each trainee understood their role. By now, even the Drellans deferred to his guidance, following without question, knowing that his methods were effective. The human trainees looked at Caleb with quiet admiration. They had once thought survival impossible. They had once doubted themselves, their skills, and the strength of their species. Now, guided by a single human, they had learned that intelligence, observation, and strategy could triumph over brute strength. Caleb's calm, calculated approach had saved them repeatedly, and each success reinforced the notion that humans were far more adaptable than anyone had believed. Commander Ithara's voice came through the communicator again, tense and measured. "Report." "Status," Caleb responded with precise detail, explaining predator behavior, terrain challenges, and safe zones. He emphasized observation and strategic movement rather than direct confrontation. Ithara listened, astonished. The humans' actions were not only keeping the team alive, they were teaching the predators to hesitate, to retreat, and to respect boundaries they had never respected before. The night was long, filled with intermittent disturbances. Predators prowled the edges of the canyon, testing the humans' positions, but Caleb's calm presence and careful adjustments ensured that no attack succeeded. The cadets, once fearful and disorganized, moved in harmony, responding to his subtle signals and silent guidance. For the first time, it was clear. Humans were not just surviving, they were controlling the battlefield without weapons, without armor, and without intimidation. When dawn broke, the apex predator returned. Its massive body moved with precision, testing boundaries, circling, and observing. But Caleb was ready. He guided the team through a narrow gorge, using terrain to constrain the predator's movement. Every step, every gesture was calculated. The predator, massive and powerful, could not find a clear path to attack. Frustrated, it hesitated, growled softly, and finally, without striking, retreated again. The cadets stared in awe. Humans, small and seemingly weak, had forced retreat from creatures considered unstoppable. Caleb's strategy had succeeded. He had demonstrated that survival, control, and influence did not require brute force, only understanding, patience, and precise action. By midday, the group moved cautiously toward higher ground. Caleb's methods had reshaped the forest's dynamics. Predators avoided zones he had influenced, showing hesitation that had never been documented. The cadets, inspired by his example, moved with awareness, applying his tactics independently while following his subtle guidance. Caleb had become more than a survivor. He had become a teacher, a leader, and a symbol of what humans could achieve when underestimated. No one in the galaxy had expected this. No one had anticipated that a human could force apex predators to retreat without weapons or dominance. Caleb had changed the rules of survival, not through strength, but through intelligence, observation, and patience. The forest of Varkin 9 would remember the human who taught predators caution, and the cadets would carry his lessons forward into every challenge they faced. The forest of Varkin 9 had grown eerily quiet by mid-morning. The shadows between the twisted trees seemed heavier, and the air carried a tension that Caleb could feel in his bones. For the first time, the predators seemed to coordinate with more intelligence, moving silently through the dense undergrowth as if hunting with purpose rather than instinct. Caleb knew this was a turning point. His prior successes had forced the apex predators to retreat before, but now they had learned caution. They were not defeated, they were observing, adapting, and waiting for a mistake. Caleb led his team along a narrow ridge, every step deliberate, every gesture calculated. The Drellins, usually overconfident, moved with silent trust behind him. The smaller human trainees followed closely, eyes wide, still learning to read the forest through Caleb's perspective. He had taught them to watch for patterns, the flicker of a shadow, a shifted leaf, the softest rustle of movement, and to respond with precision rather than panic. Their path led to a canyon, a natural choke point surrounded by cliffs and boulders. Caleb paused, scanning the area. He noticed signs of recent predator activity, large claw marks on stone, displaced foliage, and faint scents that suggested multiple apex predators were nearby. He crouched and gestured for the cadets to do the same. "Stay quiet. Watch and wait," he whispered softly. "Do not move until I signal." The team obeyed. Seconds felt like minutes as they waited. Then, from the shadows, a massive predator emerged. Its eyes glowed pale yellow, and its jaws opened slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth. But Caleb noticed something unusual. Another predator appeared behind it, smaller but still formidable, and there was a third, hidden completely by the shadows. The apex predators were no longer hunting individually. They were coordinating. A murmur of fear ran through the cadets. One Drellin whispered, "They have learned, they are planning something." Caleb did not respond. He did not need to. He had anticipated this. He had been tracking the predators' behavior patterns and noticed that when they worked together, they attempted to flank and isolate targets. His task now was to prevent that. He led the team through a careful series of maneuvers, guiding them along narrow ledges and behind boulders. He created zones where the predators' movement was constrained, forcing them to approach one at a time. His focus was intense. He had learned that apex predators responded to confidence and perception. Panic would trigger an attack, hesitation would trigger testing, calm and precision could force retreat even from the most aggressive creatures. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the canyon. One of the cadets had stepped on a brittle branch. The sound carried instantly. The predators reacted immediately, snarling, eyes locking onto the human group. One of the Drellins lunged forward instinctively, claws extended. Caleb grabbed the arm, pulling him back. "No," he hissed. "Wait, watch." Caleb moved slowly into view, arms raised slightly to guide the predator's attention. His small frame, unarmed and unarmored, seemed vulnerable, but his confidence radiated outward. The predators paused, uncertain. He clapped once, a sharp sound that echoed through the canyon. One predator backed off slightly, another hesitated, and the third circled, testing. Caleb adjusted his stance, moving deliberately toward the gorge, using terrain to his advantage. The predators lunged simultaneously, but Caleb had anticipated their paths. Using fallen rocks, branches, and his precise positioning, he forced each predator into zones where their size became a disadvantage. The first predator scraped its claws against a boulder, the second became wedged slightly in a narrow passage, and the third hesitated at the edge of a cliff. Caleb's calm and deliberate movements controlled the flow of the encounter. Then unexpectedly, one of the Drellins broke formation. Thrak, the insectoid cadet, had panicked and charged toward the nearest predator. The apex predator roared, claws slashing dangerously close. Caleb reacted instantly, throwing himself in front of Thrak and guiding both back behind a boulder. The predator growled but did not attack further. Caleb realized the cadets were still learning. Even with guidance, instinct could betray them. By midday, the situation grew more complex. The apex predators had regrouped, testing different approaches, circling and probing for weaknesses. Caleb had to think several steps ahead. He split the cadets into pairs, assigning each to cover specific areas and to watch for subtle predator behavior changes. He led the humans and smaller species along a path that forced the predators to expose themselves in constrained spaces, creating zones where retreat was the safest option. Amidst the tension, another challenge emerged. One of the older predator cadets, a grizzled veteran named Kale, had begun to distrust Caleb's leadership. "We are being manipulated by a human," he hissed to another veteran. "He does not understand our ways. We should take control." Kale began to move independently, attempting to override Caleb's guidance and lead his team forward aggressively. Caleb noticed immediately. He had anticipated resistance from other species, especially those who relied on instinct and brute force. But he could not allow Kale to compromise the team. Using subtle gestures and positioning, Caleb redirected the human trainees and smaller species, isolating Kale's actions from influencing the group. When Kale advanced too far, Caleb maneuvered a series of rocks and trees between him and the apex predators, ensuring that Kale would face the consequences of his reckless approach without endangering the rest. The apex predators reacted differently to Kale. They became confused, frustrated by the lack of cohesion in the attack. Caleb used this moment to reinforce his strategy, guiding the group through a series of narrow passes and natural barriers. By the afternoon, Kale had no choice but to follow Caleb's lead, recognizing that the humans' methods were more effective than blind aggression. Exhaustion began to weigh on the cadets. The forest had tested them physically and mentally. Caleb's calm, deliberate movements and strategic thinking had kept them alive, but the strain was evident. He encouraged short breaks, careful hydration, and observation of predator patterns while maintaining the overall strategy. Each break was timed to ensure the predators never gained the upper hand. By late afternoon, a massive predator, larger than any previously encountered, appeared at the edge of the canyon. Its eyes glowed with intelligence, and its movements were deliberate, calculating. It had learned from previous encounters, and it tested the group cautiously. Caleb analyzed its behavior. He noticed subtle cues, how it adjusted its stance, the slight shifts in its weight, the way it hesitated near certain terrain features. He realized this was the ultimate test. Caleb guided the group into a natural amphitheater formed by cliffs and boulders. Here, the predators could see them clearly but could not maneuver easily. He positioned the trainees strategically, creating the illusion of a larger, coordinated force. The apex predator paused, growled, and circled. Caleb raised his hands slowly, moving with deliberate confidence. The predator hesitated, testing boundaries. Then Caleb clapped sharply, stepped forward, and moved with careful precision toward the predator's line of sight. The creature, frustrated by the lack of easy prey and the human's deliberate control, began to retreat. Slowly, it stepped backward, then turned and slunk into the forest. The smaller predators followed, uncertain and cautious. The cadets stared in awe. The apex predators, the most dangerous creatures on the planet, had retreated without a single attack. Caleb had achieved what no other species had, forcing retreat through intelligence, observation, and strategy rather than strength or weaponry. The forest had acknowledged the human as a force to be reckoned with. As night fell, the cadets set up camp on higher ground. Caleb moved quietly among them, checking positions, reinforcing safety zones, and ensuring that each trainee understood their role. Even the older, skeptical predators began to follow his guidance without question. He had earned their trust, not through dominance but through consistent, calculated action. Around the campfire, the cadets reflected on the day. Fear had been replaced with respect, doubt with awe. Caleb's small, unarmed frame had controlled the battlefield, influenced predator behavior, and guided the group to safety repeatedly. His calm demeanor and strategic mind had changed their perception of humans forever. Commander Athara's voice came through the communicator, tense and respectful. "Report. How did the team manage?" Caleb explained each encounter, detailing predator behavior, terrain advantages, and strategic positioning. He emphasized observation, adaptation, and calculated action rather than direct confrontation. Ithara listened silently, astonished. Caleb's actions had not only preserved the team but had forced apex predators to retreat, something no species had ever achieved. Exhausted but alert, the cadets prepared for the night. Predators still lurked at the edges, but Caleb's careful arrangements ensured their positions were secure. The lessons of the day were clear. Humans could survive, influence, and even control forces far stronger and more dangerous than themselves. By dawn, it was evident that Caleb had fundamentally altered the dynamics of Varkin 9. Predators now approached cautiously, testing boundaries rather than attacking outright. The cadets had learned to trust in observation, strategy, and patience rather than brute force. Caleb had proven that humans, small and fragile as they seemed, could outthink, outlast, and outmaneuver even the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. No species had expected this. No one had anticipated that a human could force apex predators to retreat repeatedly, shaping the battlefield without weapons, without armor, and without intimidation. Caleb had not only survived, but had become a symbol of human ingenuity and resilience. The first light of dawn spread across the dense forest of Varkin 9, casting long shadows over jagged rocks and twisted trees. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the remnants of predator activity. Caleb and his team moved cautiously, each step deliberate, aware that the apex predators still lurked somewhere in the dense undergrowth. The forest, once chaotic and deadly, now bore the marks of the humans' presence. Paths had been carved, zones of safety established, and predators had learned hesitation. Caleb walked at the front, scanning for movement. The Drellans and other species followed, trusting his guidance implicitly. Even Kale, the skeptical predator cadet from earlier, had fallen into formation, recognizing that Caleb's methods were more effective than instinctive aggression. The human's calm, deliberate pace set the rhythm, and the other trainees mirrored his movements. Silence reigned, but it was not fear, it was focused awareness. As they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley, the group paused. Caleb's sharp eyes caught movement far below, a massive gathering of predators, larger and more organized than any they had faced. The apex predators were converging, likely responding to the humans' presence. For the first time, Caleb could see the scale of the challenge. Hundreds of predators, coordinated, intelligent, and hungry, were advancing toward them. Panic flickered in some of the cadets' eyes, but Caleb remained composed. "This is not just survival," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "This is a test of understanding. Follow my lead, trust your instincts, and move as one. Remember what we have learned." The group descended carefully into the valley, using rocks, trees, and natural barriers to control movement. Caleb positioned the human trainees in small groups, assigning observation points and clear escape routes. The larger species, including the Drellans and Thrak, covered flanks and high ground. Every detail mattered. Caleb had learned that in order to survive against overwhelming odds, every step, every pause, and every gesture must be precise. As they moved, the first predators entered the valley. Massive, shadow-scaled creatures, they advanced with intelligence, testing the humans' reactions. Caleb moved deliberately, projecting calm confidence. He guided the team toward narrow passages where the predators' size became a disadvantage. The apex predators hesitated, growled, and circled, but Caleb's presence shaped their decisions. His strategy was no longer just about evasion, it was about control. A smaller predator lunged at one of the human trainees. Caleb reacted instantly, using a fallen log as a shield and guiding the trainee to safety. The predator hit the barrier, frustrated, and retreated slightly. Other predators paused, watching. Caleb's calculated presence forced them to reconsider, questioning whether attacking was worth the risk. The scale of the challenge increased when a massive shadow descended from the trees above. Another apex predator, larger than any the cadets had encountered, moved with terrifying precision. Its eyes glowed pale yellow, intelligent and calculating. The cadets froze, some instinctively preparing for attack. Caleb, however, remained calm. He analyzed the predator's movements, noting subtle patterns, how it shifted weight, how it tested boundaries, how it approached cautiously. Using the terrain, Caleb positioned the team in a series of narrow passes formed by fallen rocks and twisted trees. He guided the apex predator into zones where its size and weight became liabilities. Each step he took, each subtle movement, forced the creature to hesitate. The predator growled in frustration, unable to strike without risk. Caleb's calm demeanor and strategic guidance had transformed the battlefield. Suddenly, one of the Drellins, overwhelmed by instinct, charged at the predator. Caleb reacted immediately, intercepting and redirecting him behind a boulder. The predator paused, confused by the sudden disruption. Caleb seized the opportunity, using deliberate steps and gestures to create the illusion of a larger, coordinated human force. The apex predator hesitated again, calculating. It began to retreat slowly at first, then with growing urgency. The other predators followed, mirroring the retreat. The valley that had seemed like a trap now bore witness to an extraordinary sight. Apex predators yielding to humans, not through strength or weaponry, but through strategy, perception, and intelligence. Caleb's team watched in awe. Fear had been replaced by understanding. Respect was dawning, not just among the cadets, but within the predators themselves. Caleb's mind raced. He knew this retreat was a turning point, but it was not complete. He guided the team further, positioning themselves on high ground overlooking the valley. From this vantage, they could observe predator movement and predict the next approach. He signaled to the cadets, who moved in silent coordination, reinforcing positions, establishing zones of safety, and preparing for any further testing. By midday, the predators had retreated entirely, moving away from the humans' established zones. Caleb had forced a situation previously thought impossible. Apex predators, relentless and intelligent, had withdrawn without direct combat. The cadets were stunned. They had witnessed a species, previously underestimated and ridiculed, achieving mastery through intelligence and observation rather than physical dominance. Commander Athara's voice came through the communicator, uncharacteristically quiet. "Caleb, explain." Caleb calmly detailed every move, every observation, every strategic adjustment. He emphasized observation, adaptability, and patient action over direct confrontation. Ithara listened, realizing that this human had done what no other species in the galaxy had managed. Survival against the deadliest predators without weapons, without armor, without aggression. The cadets gathered around Caleb as the day wore on, their exhaustion tempered by awe. The Drellins, Thrak, and even Kale, who had doubted him before, now looked upon Caleb with respect. He had taught them a lesson far beyond physical combat. Intelligence, patience, and understanding could achieve what brute force never could. As the sun began to set, the group moved toward higher ground, establishing a final camp for the night. Caleb checked positions, ensured everyone understood their responsibilities, and reinforced safety zones. Predators were still nearby, but they kept their distance. For the first time, the humans were not just surviving, they were shaping the environment, influencing predator behavior and commanding respect. That night around the campfire, the cadets spoke quietly. Fear had transformed into admiration. Humans, they realized, were not weak. They were adaptive, patient, and clever. They could survive, influence, and even lead in situations where raw strength failed. Caleb sat quietly among them, accepting respect without arrogance. Survival, he knew, was about action, not recognition. The next morning, the cadets prepared to return to the academy. Caleb's influence was evident. The predators avoided the zones the humans had established. The valley that had once been a hunting ground for apex predators now bore human markings, paths, barriers, and zones of control. The cadets had not just survived, they had changed the battlefield. As they approached the drop zone for extraction, Ithara's voice came through the communicator again. "Caleb, you have done the impossible. You have forced apex predators to retreat. You have proven that humans are capable of far more than I ever imagined." Caleb remained calm. "We survived because we understood them," he replied. "Because we observed, adapted, and acted deliberately. Strength alone does not determine survival. Awareness and patience do." Ithara paused, realizing that she had underestimated humans. What she had once considered the weakest species in the galaxy had demonstrated resilience, intelligence, and mastery over forces far beyond themselves. The Academy would not soon forget this exercise, nor the human who had changed the rules of survival. As the extraction shuttle descended, the cadets looked out over the forest. Predators moved in the distance, wary and cautious. Caleb's actions had altered the balance. Humans had earned respect not through aggression or force, but through understanding, observation, and careful action. The galaxy had underestimated them, and that underestimation had been their greatest advantage. When the shuttle lifted off, Caleb allowed himself a small exhale. The exercise was complete. The apex predators had been influenced, the cadets had survived, and humanity had proven its unique strength. Across the galaxy, the lesson would echo: humans were not to be underestimated. They adapted. They survived. They influenced forces far larger and stronger than themselves. Back at the Academy, the cadets received recognition not for brute strength or combat skill, but for strategy, leadership, and observation. Caleb's actions became a case study for future trainees. Instructors from every species marveled at the human who had forced apex predators to retreat. The narrative was clear. Intelligence, patience, and understanding could overcome even the most formidable foes. In the days that followed, the predators' behavior shifted permanently. They avoided zones humans had marked, tested new strategies, and even displayed hesitation when encountering human teams elsewhere. Caleb's actions had not only ensured survival, but had left a lasting imprint on the ecosystem of Varkin 9. The galaxy began to take note. Humans were adaptable, clever, and capable of turning apparent weakness into an advantage that no species had predicted. Caleb stood quietly in the Academy's observation hall, looking down at the planet below. The predators had retreated, the cadets had survived, and humanity had proven its value in ways that strength alone could never achieve. He did not boast. He did not celebrate. He understood that true strength lay not in recognition, but in the quiet, deliberate mastery of one's environment and the unwavering courage to act despite fear. For the first time, Ithara and the other instructors fully acknowledged the human potential. The Academy would never be the same. The galaxy would never be the same. Humans had proven that even the smallest, seemingly weakest species could shape the course of survival, influence forces far larger than themselves, and earn respect not through domination, but through intellect, observation, and the patient art of strategy. Caleb turned to his team, who looked back at him with admiration and gratitude. They had survived together, learned together, and grown stronger under his guidance. The apex predators had retreated, but the human spirit had advanced, unbroken, resilient, and undeniable. The forest of Varkin 9 had witnessed something extraordinary, a species underestimated by all, yet capable of triumphing through intellect, patience, and the quiet strength of humanity. The Academy's report would record it as a historic exercise. The galaxy would learn to respect humans not for what they lacked, but for what they had: adaptability, intelligence, endurance, and the courage to stand firm when all others would flee. Caleb had not only survived the apex predators, he had reshaped the understanding of human potential forever. And as the sun rose over Varkin 9, casting golden light across the forest, it was clear. Humanity had emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through the unyielding power of the mind, the courage to act, and the indomitable spirit of survival.